Greetings everybody and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be taking a look at all of the Final Fantasy V characters and their upgrades. Well, okay, let me amend that a little bit. All of the old Final Fantasy V characters and their upgrades. There's a bunch of stuff to get into. Whether or not these will be substantial upgrades for these characters to become meta, well, we're going to have to table that discussion for another time besides just generally really early impressions. But we'll do our best. So let us start off with Barts, the leading man from the previous collaboration whose master ability was essentially just AoE resistance and slash attack resistance penetration. If I was to say a fault towards Barts in the current meta, besides just generally that his DPS has not kept up with some of the stuff that characters are doing now, and a lot of characters are just doing more with their abilities than previous, I wouldn't say that Barts has the best chance of coming back and being the most insanely strong, because characters are just way better now and way more efficient than they previously have been. But that being said, Barts is also no slouch. He has been historically quite strong and very useful in even challenge-based content. So that is a potential benefit for Barts to actually have a chance to come back. And Yuna is just fucking strong. So anyway, I'm now going to read the full master ability up to and including 3 for Barts. There is, to my knowledge, this update did add master ability 2 and 3. And no, it is not as substantial as the tactics-based characters, but FF5 is not as old, so it kind of makes sense. So first off, Bart's first upgrade to his master ability now is totaled at increase AoE resistance of 10, increase slash attack resistance penetration rate of 10, AoE resistance penetration rate is of 20, accuracy is been increased by 30, reducing magical damage taken of 20% per self when HP is over 50%. When HP drops below 50%, cast a ability that will restore a certain percentage of HP, which is 40% for himself one time. Honestly, quite a nice upgrade for Barts. Two big things that he needed to improve on: his DPS and his survivability. And I think we see both of that already in his master ability 3 pretty nicely. Also, the accuracy bonus is quite good for potentially pushing him into further into what Light is wanting to do. Now, overall his DPS does feel stronger, and it's interesting that he has essentially anti-magic, but for any time that his HP is over 50%, and when his HP drops below 50%, it gets pushed right back above below 50%, giving him a fair amount of survivability against a specific damage type, if nothing else. That's all pretty good. We're not looking at any other ability improvements in his kit besides his Limit Burst. Now, Limit Burst is a little bit cheaper at 33 AP, and the range has stayed the exact same from what it previously was. Now, first off, it breaks physical barriers for targets now, which is quite nice, while also decreasing slash resistance by 38% and a 240 mod. So the mod has been increased to be higher damage, and breaking physical barriers is one of the best things you can add for a character, because essentially his DPS is way more shored up against a lot of other type of characters. But what also is curious here about Barts is that this did previously increase one ability, and it does have it listed here that it does upgrade the skill twice, and that is his large AoE. So interestingly, his AoE that decreases AoE resistance is still listed as a factor of 30 at a 200% mod. May require a little bit of investigation to see how that actually has been improved, because as of right now it just seems a little bit not necessarily entered correctly into Wotv Calc, so I do question if there's anything else that is missing or potentially not in there. As for Bart's weapon, going up to 6-star is a pretty big improvement. Assault goes up to 211 attack, which is pretty good. However, the accuracy version is up to 31. Depending on who you are hunting, that will basically determine which of these versions you want. So I think overall, Assault is probably better. As for the conditions for this, total now, besides the general slash attack on the sword, we're looking at increased slash attack resistance penetration of 20, decrease AP consumption of 15, reaction block rate increase of 30, and an increase of AoE resistance penetration of 20. So overall, I feel like Bart's got a nice series of upgrades to potentially play quite nicely with some of the characters that are doing well in the light element. It could be that he actually is a decent replacement for AC Cloud if you don't have him, just because of his natural resistance to magic damage, and then potentially just pushing along with Yuna to do some follow-up shenanigans stuff. Either way, I definitely don't hate Bart's in this combination, and I'm quite happy with his upgrades, at least initially. Whether or not it is enough, well, we'll test that in due time. But let's move on to our next character, Lena, who 90 cost sweetheart that she is. I'm pulling for her to actually have a substantial good list of upgrades. So initial, excuse me, master quest, master ability, whatever, HP up by 15%, decrease activation time by 200. Or now total master ability, increase HP by 20% for self, decrease skill activation time by 200, increase AoE resistance by 20, increase physical distance-based resistance by 10 for a minimum range of 3, maximum range of 6, and when her HP drops to a certain amount, a condition will trigger another ability. That other ability, dispel all debuffs when HP is below 70%, as well as dispel physical damage reduction and magical damage reduction, which is kind of interesting and for herself, and I don't quite understand what they were going for that. As for her limit burst did get an upgrade, so let's take an actual peek because this is more important than Bart's. It still costs 69 AP, so it is generally fairly expensive, but on this limit burst, we are now healing for the same amount at a greater range. The range has been increased by the looks of it from 3 to 1, 2, 3, 4. So it actually has been increased by 1. It can be used also multiple times now. Now, as for the effect of it, unfortunately the effect has stayed the same. Hasn't been increased by the number of turns or the number of HP. So I do feel that I'm a little disappointed in Lena's upgrades because she kind of needed to do more to be remotely competitive to a lot of other healers that are out there. And I think that if she had gotten, a nice kind of swimsuit Resnick style upgrade, that probably would have been good enough to give her an aura style effect. But that was very clearly not in the design document. So I'm a little sad that Lena did, effectively kind of get a bit less than she probably should have. But we have one more upgrade to talk about, her equipment, which is the Majesty of Tycoon. And we'll talk about that in just a second as my browser slowly loads. Way too many things open. And I think Wotv Calc is just a little busy. All right. So magic version has been increased up to a 182 stat. That's a nice improvement from the 152. It does have an aim version, but the aim version's only at 13. Not really good enough. Now the conditions for this for Lena, before it was just healing power up, We're also looking at HP up of 15%, magic up of 30%, agility up by 8, decreased chance of being targeted by 3. So the big thing being added here is the decreased chance of being targeted by 3, which is quite valuable. I still feel that all of these upgrades are way too soft. They looked at her and said, she's a 90 cost, we can't make her really that good, and that sucks. I'm not going to be on the positive side of that. So I do wish that Lena's upgrades were more significant, but I guess Gumi just didn't want, it wasn't her Christmas kind of thing. So, who on you, Gumi? And last but not least, Captain Ferris. Increase attack and AoE resistance was her initial Master Quest ability. And thankfully, we're looking at some improvements. So, increase attack by 20% for herself, increase slash attack resistance by 20 for herself, 200% chance of a physical increase of 10% for herself, AoE resistance of 10, debuff effect weakening of 30, and reaction block rate of 40, makes for a fairly comprehensive upgrade that feels like this will do a bunch for her. Now, the thing of note is that she didn't get any secondary effects, unlike Barts and Lena, which I just don't really get what exactly Gumi was going for here between all the characters. It does feel like they didn't have a unifying theme, or some of the themes came and went, but since both of the other characters got some HP restore, or some, their HP dropped below a certain percent, they got an effect, Ferris feels a little bit left out from that. She did get another effect, which we'll talk about, but feels weird not to have that nice conditional one. Either way, more damage, debuff effect weakening makes her overall more solid and less likely to be gotten through as easy. I feel positive to that. Now, talking about the ability that got improved, it is... Okay, this maybe makes up for it a little bit. Trying to be a little quick. So she has an ability that increases slash attack resistance, strike resistance by 20% for each, and also grants an effect upon self of dispelling all buffs, haste, physical damage, and magical damage for 4 turns when she hits an opponent. Now, that final effect there has been upgraded from 3 turns to 4 turns, which is pretty nice. But the other thing that she has gotten off of this is that she now also has a physical damage barrier of 7,500 HP, and this is an ability she can cast 3 times. Quite a nice little upgrade for this character, considering that she is still somewhat used, I have seen, and actually, still a little bit strong, but this overall update goes a lot towards her survivability and some nice stuff towards her DPS. I feel, pretty positive about it. Limit Burst upgrade before, so we were looking at a defense penetration rate of 50 on this, 200% mod, decrease CT for targets, increase CT for self. The big thing that we are looking at, so defense penetration has stayed the exact same on it. AoE resistance penetration has been actually added to this of 30 for 3 turns, which isn't amazing, but it's something that actually upgrades her DPS across a lot of her kit. Still a 200% mod. We are still having the exact same for CT effects on targets, but if she can hit 3 targets in the plus style AoE, this does get a 75% increase in damage to those 3 targets, which is a significant amount of damage increase on her limit burst, and increases AoE resistance penetration for 3 turns by 30 for targets. So I have to say, overall, I think that probably Ferris, looking maybe some of the overall best benefits, but we do have one more thing to talk about. The Serpent Fang. And so this will kind of determine where we sit with all of these characters. And again, just waiting for Wotv Calc to load. Way too many windows open. Alright, so overall, this version had either Assault or Vitality. Assault has been upgraded up to a 198 attack. That's almost certainly the one you want because it already comes with 20 accuracy anyway. That's quite a nice combination for this character. Now, there was a bunch of stuff on this weapon, from increasing human killer on physical attacks, increasing defense debuff resistance when HP was over a certain percentage, spirit debuff resistance, and increasing AoE resistance when HP was below a certain amount. The interesting thing that's been added to this weapon is that it now also has increased healing power when HP is below 70%, which is pretty neat of just supporting the idea of the Serpent Fang, of being like, if your HP is above or below a certain percentage, well, then you get this kind of effect off of it. So yeah, I have to say that I quite like Ferris's upgrades. I think that Ferris is probably my favorite of the three for all the upgrades that we are looking at. I think hers are the most comprehensive, and at least on paper, look the best. Now, whether Ferris or not gets into the meta is probably less likely, because what water is doing right now is a combination with earth and doing magical things. So there has to be a really strong upgrade to this character to find her way into a new team, since water is kind of not doing the physical thing so much. However, you know, Spring Joom is hanging in there. So that is a consideration. But overall, I like Ferris's upgrades the most. Lena is the one I like the least, because it feels like they haven't done enough with her. And Barts is in the middle, but probably the most likely to actually find a way into current teams with his accuracy increase, and just being maybe more synergistic with some of the characters that are out there and just doing better. So that is my thoughts about Final Fantasy V. Of course, we will check over the next few weeks and see how these characters do and whether or not their performance upgrades make enough of a difference for them to be meta. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your comments and thoughts below about these characters' upgrades and which ones you are the most excited for. But for me, I'm still Team Ferris, although Barts is pretty cool too. Later.